Hi, my name is Anna Baglione, and today I'll be speaking about our work entitled Understanding the Technological Practices and Needs of Music Therapists. So I'd like to briefly thank my co-authors listed here, especially Dr. Luke Dahl and Dr. Patrick Shih, both of whom served as co-PIs on this project. So first, a brief introduction. Nearly 1 million individuals receive music therapy in the United States alone each year. And though you may think of a music therapist as somebody who comes in and maybe only serves sick people in a hospital, for example, they actually serve all kinds, including those who may have cognitive disabilities or are struggling with mental health issues. Clinical studies have established the efficacy of music therapy in reducing symptoms of disease, be they behavioral or mental. As an evidence-based field, music therapy has several phases that make it successful. The first is referring a client to treatment. The second is assessment, which assesses the client's needs and determines appropriate techniques for therapy. The third is treatment planning and intervention, which is the therapy itself and continuing to set goals throughout that process. Fourth is documentation and evaluation of progress. And finally, the ultimate goal of therapy is termination due to completion of goals. In HCI, there are actually several examples of music technologies you might not be aware of, and I've broadly categorized these into three groups. The first is tactile, gesture-based, and haptic systems, which are things you can pick up and move around and use to generate sound. The second is augmented reality, where you bring these pieces of the real world and fuse them with musical sounds. And then the third, of course, is networked systems, which allow collaboration across geographic distances with low latency. Now, music therapy as a field also has tools in similar veins. So they have tactile, gesture-based, and haptic systems, but they are much more focused on collaboration, accessibility. Let me correct myself, maybe not much more, I'll say equally. They also have analysis tools, things that allow the therapist to see whether the client is making appropriate progress. So this could mean anything from, did the client play the notes I wanted them to play, to did they flex their fingers in the way that is encouraging movement? So in both HCI and music therapy, there, as I said, is a focus on accessibility and collaboration, just in different ways. But in HCI, in our world, the focus is almost always on the clients. Very rarely is any work done to prioritize the needs of music therapists. There are a few exceptions, but we argue that this needs to change. HCI needs a better understanding of music therapists' technology needs so that we can better design for both them and their clients. So we did a survey and interview study. The survey component included semi-structured interviews, the interview component included semi-structured interviews with 10 actively practicing music therapists in the United States. These were conducted in a variety of places, one of the most fun of which was at a national music therapy conference. And questions included things like, how does your therapy session flow? What technology do you use? And what barriers do you face as a music therapist? We analyzed these interviews using thematic analysis and affinity diagramming. The racial and gender background of this group is pretty consistent with what the American Music Therapy Association indicates is true of the field. So it's largely white and female. Our group was clustered in the eastern half of the United States and had a broad range of experience, everywhere from 2 to 17 years in the field. For the survey component, we administered a 50-item survey and gathered 20 responses using Qualtrics. And we asked questions from Biasudi's Music Therapy Practice Scale, which asks about how a therapist goes about their day, does things like documenting client progress, communicates with clients. And so we augmented that with different technology-centric questions. And I will note that wasn't our focus to develop a new scale, and so there isn't an analysis of whether the factor loadings are better than the original. That's certainly an area of future work if somebody wanted to do that. And so we analyzed the numeric questions in aggregate and used thematic analysis once again. And again, this breakdown is pretty consistent with the field. So largely white young females with some multiracial and Asian or Pacific Islander participants as well. So the results. We found a widespread use of technologies among music therapists, with tablets leading the charge, and then smartphones and music streaming services being also very important. And so we also found music therapists are willing and able to use technologies regularly in their practice. They're not technology averse, they're very excited to use it. And some do prefer their traditional tools alongside of it, like paper calendars and binders, but nobody really expressed an aversion to technology. So we extracted 5 key themes about why music therapists use technology. The first of these is efficiency. So being able to find songs very quickly, organize materials, and transport things to the client when needed. And the example I give is it's much easier to pick up a digital keyboard than it is a giant real piano. And so one participant noted that it used to take hours and hours and potentially days to construct playlists that were appropriate for her client, but now she can go and look them up very quickly. All she has to do is search online. The second topic we found is communication and musicking. So therapists use technology as a communication tool, especially for their clients who have disabilities or may be going through grief or trauma. And so one client noted, we often recognized after working with these clients that once we gave them the tools to communicate, they had experienced significant trauma, but couldn't say that before because they were nonverbal. Number 3, personalized connection. The therapist in this case is working very, very hard to establish a foundation of trust and incorporate musical content that makes sense for the client that they're working with at that given time. So it's very personalized. And so participant 8, or interviewee 8, noted, I use the Spotify app and I can look up any songs the patient requests, and it's a great way to build rapport with them. I can just do it instantly. The fourth reason is client identity formation. And this came up in particular in relation to a participant who works a lot with LGBT groups. And so this was super important to her practice, as was the cultivating of cultural identity as well, which spanned across therapists. So in helping clients to navigate these different types of identity, be it gender, sexuality, culture, things like YouTube were very useful. So this participant said, I have to be culturally sensitive. And so I'm finding music and familiarizing myself with it because I know it's what my clients listen to. And finally, legacy preservation. So music therapists engage in pre-bereavement activities with people who may want to create a recording for a loved one or a memory of a loved one who is about to pass away. This was one of the particularly powerful themes we found. And for the sake of time, I'll summarize these briefly. We also found several challenges that music therapists face, both tech-centric and non-tech-centric. And so these included environmental and societal challenges, such as expectations of the client to easily transcend stigma and trauma, and things like restrictive caseloads for the therapist. There were also issues with education, whether that meant perceived gaps in the therapist's education, and telling the public, hey, this is a really useful service. There were also some key issues around privacy and connectivity. In particular, free software services aren't usually HIPAA compliant, and so it can lead to a lot of barriers and paperwork when music therapists choose to use them for remote work. And finally, finances. In the words of one participant, we are mandated by the state, but not well funded. And so given these results, we identified 3 key implications for design. Number 1, personalize the technology when at all possible to facilitate personalized connection and communication. Number 2, foster identity exploration, and if so, through those personalized tools. And number 3, develop novel telehealth solutions, especially in the time of COVID-19. In conclusion, we presented a mixed methods survey and interview study of music therapists in the United States. We found they use a wide range of technologies for several key purposes, including efficiency, personalized connection, and others. And finally, we recommend that designers focus on personalization of tech, identity formation, and telehealth moving forward when designing for music therapists. Thank you, and if you have any questions, you can reach me here.